TorahCafe.com.
As you point out very correctly, Sweden is one of the most, if not the most, secular country in the world, which naturally, of course, affects also the Jewish community. So for 50, 60 years after the war, Jews have been trained to hide, to not stick out, to blend into the Swedish society, to be part of, there's a word in Swedish called lagom, which means just about okay. Don't be too much, don't be too low, don't stick out. And of course it affected Jews to a very great degree, because Jews like to be like their Swedish neighbors. They're very afraid to show that they're Jews. It's not like my wife comes from France and I'm often there, and there the Jews are very proud to be Jewish. They show it in the streets and everybody's walking with the yarmulke. In Sweden it's very opposite. And one of our greatest challenges was actually when we decided the first year we came to light a public menorah, like the Rabbi instructed us to have a menorah in the street, in a public square. And the biggest criticism we received was from our best friends, who were so upset that we're going to, for the first time in many years, do a Jewish religious ceremony out in the street. And this was unheard of for years and years. And but Baruch Hashem, we did it, and it was a great success. And you actually see the thirst, the desire people have. And one of the greatest accomplishments after this menorah lighting, every year I hear from people how proud they are to be able to stand with fellow Jews in the street and show that they're Jewish. So even though they've been trained to keep quiet for so many years, inside there's that Pintel Yid that really wants to show that they're Yidden. So that was
Must be really different to how it is over here. I got out of the subway this morning and some random guy came over to me, Happy Hanukkah. I don't think that happens in Stockholm. And we're coming from a completely different paradigm in South Africa. If you've ever traveled, I mean, anybody here traveled to Africa generally, to South Africa in particular? Yeah? So we have the exact opposite. You could do whatever you want in the street. You could put a menorah wherever it is that you want. Nobody's really going to get in your way. By the time they realize what you've done, they've sort of moved on. All sorts of interesting, crazy things happen. Here in New York, for example, one of the big issues that people get very concerned about is kaporas. You take chickens and shechting chickens, and people get very uncomfortable by it. And in Europe, it's not only kaporas. In Europe, there's an issue about shechting generally, this idea of shchita, about taking animals and slaughtering them in the way that we do traditionally. As I say, back home we don't have that problem. Your neighbor could be doing a sacrificial bull in his house because of his upcoming wedding, and that's completely acceptable. So we know as a Jewish community we're never going to have an issue with kaporas, as long as the local government remains in force. But I wonder about Tiechtel, in our minds, rightly or wrongly, when we think Germany, your average Jewish person thinks oi. The average Jewish person thinks there clearly must be some sort of an anti-Semitic undercurrent in a place like Germany. And I know for a fact that any of us, and I'm sure many of you in the room, who have family who were survivors, it's unthinkable for them that there should be a Jewish community in a place like Germany, in a place like Berlin. So just generally, but more specifically on that shchita concept, is that an issue? Do you have a shchita problem in Germany?
Well, firstly, thank you. I'd like to echo the words of Rabbi Greisman. It's a great honor to be here. Yehuda Tiechtel from Berlin. Yes, indeed, Germany does awake strong sentiments by people that have not been there or that have been there, because Germany is not only something which people relate to the Shoah. Germany has a pre-Shoah history of close to 1,800 years of Jewish thought, Jewish philosophy, Jewish law. So on one hand, Germany is a place which is very dark, has a dark past, but beyond that dark past is even a larger understanding that the Jewish people, at least the Ashkenazic Jewry, which developed in Europe, has a strong connection to Germany. Having said that, come directly to Shchita. Shchita has itself not yet been an official issue in Germany. It has been in Holland. Maybe Rabbi Schochet can share afterwards if it has been in England. But it's definitely something which will come up, because in various discussions and private meetings that I have with members of the government, you hear constantly the question. Circumcision has been an issue in Germany, thank God, with a positive with a positive result. On a government level, on an individual level, the German population has not supported the government's initiative, by and large, to make a law which says Shechita is something which should be protected and anchored in German law. However,
Sorry, is that Shechita or Mila?
Mila. Mila has something which is, the government has last year in December, on the third day of Hanukkah, created a law, a national law in Germany which protects Mila according to Jewish tradition with minor Auflagen, as they call it in German, with minor conditions. It could be done by a mohel, it doesn't have to be done by a doctor, but it should be done in a medically proper way. But the population hasn't indeed across the board supported it. However,
Can I cut in just for 1 second? The media definitely played up the anti-circumcision bill at some point. So perhaps just for the benefit of everybody, could you tell us a little bit of how the evolution happened from being this? What we heard at the time was that Germany as a country was going to ban circumcision. And what you're telling us, which many people may not know, is that the government not only reversed that, but took a completely different stance. Could you just take us a little bit through that evolution?
There's never been an effort to ban official circumcision in Germany. On the 7th of May 2012, a local court, the district of Cologne, which is an area in West Germany, has ruled that a certain procedure that took place by a Muslim doctor for a Muslim child, the doctor which made a circumcision, the child actually had complications afterwards. The local court said the doctor did not have the right to do it because the child could have not expressed his opposition to it. So the doctor should have waited till the child is 14 years old, where the child could have said no. But had no impact, no legal impact on anything other than that case. Even in that case, the judge said, I'll let you off the hook because you didn't know about it. However, this set a precedent. So we, as members and as leaders in the Jewish community, felt compelled to take a stance to it and to say that this is a very dangerous precedent because everything starts with a small snowball. And therefore, we played up the issue. We wanted clarity. And indeed, the government has immediately said, and the chancellor, that she'll get involved, and they want clarity. However, it became a public debate. In the public debate, the population across Germany did not necessarily, which they don't understand what circumcision is for us, did not necessarily understand the importance of it for us. When all was said and done, the government called a special session in August to Parliament, which voted that we want to create such a law. Parliament has created a law, to make it short, and in December, by an overwhelming majority, December 2012, in the midst of Hanukkah, there was a law set and accepted by the German Bundestag which protects circumcision without conditions like putting the baby to sleep or having it being done only by a doctor, etc., etc. So all in all, this was a great victory, and this strongly supported and strongly strengthened the identity of the Jewish people in Germany. That's particular to circumcision. I'll say one more sentence, that Jewish life in Germany has been growing by leaps and bounds. 20 years ago, there were 30,000 Jews in Germany. Today, there are 230,000 Jews in Germany. 200,000 Jews have come from Eastern Europe. The latest tendency is, in the last 5 years, 20,000 Israelis moved to Berlin. Now, you may say, that's good or bad? And we say, if it's good or bad, it's completely irrelevant. The fact is, they are there. I see over here Mr. Leonard Wien, their friend, which last year has given a Torah to the community in Berlin, and this year is giving 2 Torahs just in 3 weeks, one to the Student Center in Berlin and one to the synagogue in Dresden. A lot of American Jews have come over and have been surprised to see that there's a real awakening. To put it short, Rabbi Shishler and dear guests, Germany today is like what America was in the 50s. Whatever we're going to do in the next 10 years, that's what's going to define the next generation.
That's really quite incredible. Of course, the question many of us have is that those 20,000 Israelis, are they all selling Dead Sea products in the malls? So it's interesting that there's this, can I just understand, is 14 considered the age of majority, that they wanted consent from the age of 14? Is that how it works? in Germany?
That was the versuch, that was the effort of the opposition of the minority.
Right.
But as I said, the law actually is, in case anybody wants to know, the law is that ritual circumcision can be done by a mohel, also by a mohel, up to the age of 6 months, as long as he does it in what's called nach dem Regel der Kunst der Medizin. It has to be done according to the medical way of doing things. But if that's the case, up to 6 months, any mohel can do anywhere a circumcision.
Are you a moel?
Personally, no.
Yeah, okay, just checking. And the reason 14 was interesting to me is because the Koza people in South Africa do their circumcisions at 14 years old, and they could probably do with learning a little bit from us to move it younger, where the, shall we say, the survival rate might be a little better. Rabbi Greisman, if I could just ask you quickly about, seeing as we mentioned having a bris and shchita, I'm just curious, in Sweden, are those issues in Sweden? The shchita, kosher meat, and bris milah.
Well, shchita has been forbidden in Sweden since the 1930s. So that's influenced by Nazi Germany, and it's been forbidden since. There's been periods where it was permitted to shecht, to slaughter chicken in certain amounts. It's not practiced today. All kosher meat in Sweden is imported from rest of Europe. Circumcision has been an issue since almost 10 years ago. There's been a restriction. There's a law that was passed probably in 2001 or 2002 where you could perform circumcision under certain conditions. It has to be a mohel who's approved by the health authorities. So as long as the mohel sends in his papers and gets the necessary permits, he will be able to perform a bris under a condition as well that there should be a doctor present and there should be some type of local anesthesia done. The greater danger is not those somewhat minor restrictions, but the fact that the trend in Sweden is very against circumcision, and of course affects a lot of Jewish parents. Especially when the parent is not Jewish and is intermarried. So then it affects that the trend in Sweden is against circumcision. And I know personally many families who choose not to do a bris child because it's foreign. It's unpopular. So many children in my kids' classes are not circumcised, and of course the trend is growing, and it's dangerous. So that's been an issue for a long time.
I think we should just pause for a moment and consider if you are a religious Jewish person, much more so a rabbi. Just imagine what it is to move to a country to live with your family, where you know in advance you will never get kosher meat you'll always have to import it. I know right now in South Africa there's been a huge discussion about the cost of kosher chickens, and it's been going on, they're calling it chicken gate. It's been going on and on and on about how come it is that the kosher chickens are so expensive compared to the regular chickens. Yeah, we're not talking about price issues because perhaps the market is inflated in any way, but because there's no other way to get meat other than to bring it in. Could you imagine making that decision to go to a place where you know that's going to be a problem forever, and you know that having a bris for your child could be challenged at any given time, because it could, and it could become a major issue, and you'd have to sort of go underground. And that's the sort of commitment that Chabad rabbis make and their families make when they move to places like this. Have you had a particular story that stands out with a set of parents not wanting to give their children a bris and changing their mind?
About bris, not so much. I mean, there are many parents who, of course, do a bris, and Baruch Hashem, it's not. We're not talking about hundreds or the majority not doing a bris. It's a trend. It's something we work on, trying to get people to do a bris, even though it could be costly, it could be more challenging. I think that the greater challenges for Swedish Jewry is this mindset of blending in to the Swedish society, not to stick out and not to be different. Circumcision, bris milah is one example, but of course on a daily level and on an ongoing level, people are trying to blend in, not to stick out. This fact that people are very secular causes the rates of intermarriage to be much higher, because at the end of the day they see absolutely almost no difference between them and the Swedish non-Jewish people around them. It's if you're in a country where the non-Jews are very religious, then it creates a barrier because they have their Christian or Catholic traditions. Here, the average Swedish person has no religious, and many times they're very interested, it's very curious, it's very something new, so it causes rates of intermarriage to get higher.
Do you have any idea what those rates are?
Very high. It's probably close to 80, 90%
Can you imagine
intermarriage.
That? Wow. Wow. Okay. Is that good news? Yeah.
But at the same time, I like to bring out the cute thing that you have to see the positive thing with everything. The fact that Sweden is such a secular society, such a secular country, causes the average young Swede or even older Swede that when they see me in the street, they actually don't know that I'm Jewish. So they haven't seen a Jew. It's not like in other countries we have a large presence of Jews and people are educated that this is the way a Jew is supposed to look like. So they see me in the street, I've gotten the most interest.
They think he's a hipster.
I very often asked if I'm Amish. I've been asked if I'm a Syrian Orthodox. I've been asked if I'm an academic, if I work in a circus. All kinds of questions. So.
Well, we all know about Chabad and organized religion, so circus is not far off. So Rabbi Schochet lives in the part of the world that we would probably disassociate with just about everything we've spoken about, because when you think of Germany, you sort of just naturally think there's a synonymous anti-Semitic trend. That's just what we think. It's the way we're conditioned. And when you think of a place like Sweden, you also tend to think, well, it wouldn't surprise us if it's not a Jewish-friendly environment. But when you think of the United Kingdom, and you think of England in particular, or you think of a city like London, I think we tend to think of it, well, this is akin to what we know. You know, if we come from the Commonwealth, or if we come from the United States, we tend to imagine that it's got to be a similar sort of a society to ours. And surely these problems don't exist. Surely there's no issues around, for example, shchita, kosher meat, or bris milah. But we also all know something, and no offense to any English people who may be present, but we know how the English are. They're very polite about how they go about their anti-Semitism. And perhaps that their challenges are just a little bit more subtle and not so brash in your face as they might be elsewhere. So, Rabbi Schochet, what would you say about that, specifically on these issues, shchita and bris milah, which surely are the freedoms of a democratic society?
Subtle. Let me first reiterate from my esteemed colleagues what a delight it is to be here. Yitzchok Schochet, 1990, the Rebbe sent me to the UK. He told me that Jewry are a bunch of sinners and I have to go there to be their punishment. And it's interesting to listen to the parallels because I guess arguably Germany might have a complex of its past and will therefore want to bend over backwards to be more forthcoming for the Jewish community. Sweden is invariably very liberal in all respects. But England, as you pointed out, Rabbi Tiechtel, is in the first instance very conservative. And in that sense, the Jews therein are also very conservative and will take a very conservative approach to the particular challenges as they present themselves. Does shchita, or the concerns of shchita, come up? They have. At one point, there was this big noise a number of years ago, and it was in the press and whatever else besides. There is an anti-milah lobby that does exist, well supported by certain liberal Jews as well. But I'd say two things about this. The first is that there's always been a Jew in the court, if you like. In other words, always been a prominent Jew who kind of navigates the higher echelons of government and therefore has the opportunity to lobby when necessary and to have words in the right sort of ears to put pay to it right away. And besides that, there is a well-established broader Jewish communal body. There is what we call the Board of Jewish Deputies or the Jewish Leadership Council. And again, it's made up essentially of men that are women, that are of captains of industry, that are particularly good at lobbying the government where it may be so required. I'm going to throw something out over here that is rather controversial. But I suggest to you that you will have heard that a lot of this anti-Mila, anti-Schchita in the main has emerged over the last 10 or so years, albeit some of it which has been institutionalized from back in the 30s. But most of the threat has suddenly emerged in the last 10 years. And I suggest to you that a lot of that in the first instance is being lobbied by government or individuals within government, in the first instance as a response, if you like, to the huge influx of Muslim citizenship, many that are coming in from North African countries, etc. The governments or the countries in themselves are rather liberal in terms of their immigration laws, but then the people therein are figuring, well, if we can make life difficult for them, hence there is now the big call for the ban of the hijab, the head covering that Muslim women might wear. In France, they've already banned it, but by extension, also then Mila, Schchita, etc. And we Jews are always going to be the fall guys as a result of that, because when those things are lobbied against, well, if you're going to ban a hijab in France or all kinds of head covering in order to affect the mass Islamic population that is emigrating within, then you're invariably going to affect the Jews as well that might want to wear yarmulkes or what have you. If you're going to ban Mila and Schchita because those are things that they do, then again, we're going to become the fall guys of that as well. Mila and Schchita in and of themselves are not major problems as such in the UK, again, because there were always key people. I know that Schchita, when it emerged, I don't know, about 10 years ago or less, there was one key person who went straight to Tony Blair, the then Prime Minister, and told him straight up, if you do this, you will immediately lose most of the Jewish vote. And that's how politicians think, only in terms of vote. So it was killed off at source. That isn't to say that it cannot reemerge again. But the UK does have an altogether different problem. It has anti-Semitism, and no, Rabbi Shishler, they are not by any stretch of anyone's imagination polite with their anti-Semitism. It is very overt, it is very blatant, in many instances it is particularly violent. I suggest to you there are probably 3 or 4 types of anti-Semitism. There is the average opportunist on the street who just doesn't even really know what a Jew is or whether he does or doesn't like a Jew. He just knows it may be fashionable to say something stupid against a Jew and will therefore do that. There is the more, shall we call him, genuine anti-Semite. In other words, he hates Jews. There's no reason. Anti-Semitism is an irrational hatred. But he genuinely hates Jews, probably because that's what his parents taught him and that's what his grandparents taught them and so forth. Then there is today Islamic fundamentalism, which is mostly prevalent on university campuses, where many Jews feel, and I know that is a problem now in the United States as well, feel threatened because of the presence of those who are looking to try and always attack them on the pretense of anti-Israel, but we can get into that soon. And then there is institutionalized anti-Semitism. And that's the anti-Semitism that has always been there at the core, whether it is, some might argue, within even the royal family, whether it is within government, and it certainly is, because there are very renowned or infamous politicians who don't hesitate to say what they want to say about Jews. Again, sometimes or often in the guise of anti-Israel or what have you, or in other arenas as well. It's there, it's prevalent. In the media, it's always very subtle, but it's always very much there as well. And there is always, on the one hand, those Jews who are on the alert, who will cry foul, who will combat. Alas, there are many other Jews who are polite, and they respond simply by saying, well, it's not really anti-Semitism, and it's not really so bad, and I don't know if they really meant me, and they meant somebody else, or they meant something else, and they will always bend over backwards to try and just kind of sweep it under the carpet. And when you do that, you run all kinds of risks.
So that's quite a picture, probably not what we would anticipate. I see there are a couple of questions we can take on the floor.
If I may have the microphone, it's probably worth
It's long enough.
I'm willing to come to it. All right, I'll come up this way. My name is Leonard Ween. I'm the treasurer of the Secure Community Network, which in the United States is in the business of trying to improve the quality of security around the country. And we are working with England and France and Germany, not so much with Sweden, but it's a small community there, and we'd certainly be interested. We're having a meeting in January with representatives involved in security in all of the major European countries. Okay, I'm trying. Thank you. The reason I'm talking is I really think that you need to know that in England they have a big problem, a problem that predated World War II. And when many of the soldiers came home, they realized that the anti-Semites were still very much active in England, and they formed something called the Community Security Trust, CST, which has thousands of volunteers who actually go and they don't carry weapons, but they provide protection to Jewish community events. And this is a very important thing. Most of the Jews in England are in London. There's some in Manchester. And they have a major problem with Muslims in England. And anti-Semitism is rising as we speak. In France, I think you know that there was a rabbi and a child who were killed in front of his synagogue and in Toulouse. And anti-Semitism tends to go up and down in France depending on external events. But France is having a tough year as well. As for Germany, you should know that the synagogues are protected by the government in most cases in Germany. And while I think their problems are smaller than in England or France, I think that all of Europe is becoming more worried about anti-Semitism. This is a big deal. And all I can say is the discussion about Brit Milah and so forth is of interest because it's newsworthy. But in fact, there is a great deal of anti-Semitism going on, and by no means is it over. So in any event, thank you.
Thank you. We're going to take some more questions in a moment. If I could just, I understand, Rabbi Tiechtel, you were personally a victim of anti-Semitism a few years back. Perhaps you want to tell us a little bit about that and the general anti-Semitism experience in Berlin or Germany in general.
First, I'd like to thank Rabbi Schochet. I think you gave very important comments to describe the general situation of anti-Semitism in Europe. As you said, and as reflected by Leonard, it's not only about Shechita and Mila. I will share my personal anti-Semitism experience. However, with your permission, I would like to share with you, just that we understand how it relates to us, that there are three players in this arena. There is the government, there is the population, and there are the Jewish people, communities and individuals. As far as government is concerned, government would indeed like to do all they can to combat anti-Semitism, at least in an official manner, at least in Germany. I don't know how it is in England and in Sweden and in other countries, but the government will do all they can. The government in power, whether it's a right-center government or a left-center government, the government will do all they can to combat it for one reason. Politically, it's better. Do they need a headache? Do they need a kopvetik of having Israel or other governments or general groups of interest pointing them out, saying that you are anti-Semitic? No! They don't want it! They don't need a headache. Then you have the population, the individuals. You have the Muslim population, which is one area of anti-Semitism, and you have nationalists, which is another area. Population tends, and anti-Semitism, from country to country it varies, but population, speaking now for Germany, there is anti-Semitism. We can't deny it. In larger cities, it's covered, it's clothed, it's clothed in anti-Israelism, etc., but it's there. But most importantly, our task is, how are we going to deal with our brothers and sisters that are Jewish? How are we going to deal? Rabbi, should I take the kippah off my head when I walk down the street? Rabbi, should I not do this and this because I may be looked at from my colleagues at work in a different manner? That is the crux of the matter. That is what concerns us personally most. Of course, we have to deal with government, we have to deal with official organizations, and we have to stand up loud and clear if some politician or anyone else will say anything that even hinted anti-Semitic, being anti-Semitic, because that's our job. We got to be there with the torch. However, our immediate, most important concern is for our brothers and sisters. And to them we say, we have to be proud. You have to remember that the Lubavitcher Rebbe spent a number of years in Europe before the war. And if anybody knows or you hear the stories of the Rebbe went to great lengths not to hide his Jewish identity. And Rabbi Schochet and I were discussing on the train this morning, not to hide his Jewish identity. Our response has to be that we are proud and we will not let ourselves be abgelenkt, as they say in German, be driven off to the path, to the side, by anybody which wants to put us to the side. So therefore, our message has to be jointly, all of us together, to our brothers and sisters, one of identity and of positive pride.
Schochet.
Regarding the story, I was hoping you forgot about that. Yeah, a couple of years ago, we have a yeshiva, a school of higher learning, of higher education, where we train rabbis in Germany. And because the rabbis study so long all week, one Motzei Shabbat, one Saturday evening, we said, you know what? I'll take you around to show you some of the Jewish spots that are not known to the tour guides. For example, which university the Rabbi has studied in Berlin from 1928 to 1932, or where the Rabbi lived, etc. So it was a Saturday night, took the students to a tour of, some of the students to a tour, and we were, so to say, attacked by a group of 3 young Muslim men that first tried to cause an accident and then threw a substance which was lit on fire. But luckily, we came out easily, we came out okay, and a little while later, they were indeed arrested by the police, and they were in court, and they had to actually face charges that were pressed against them. Another story we had, which was not so happy, so to say, our kindergarten was on the 27th of February 2007, while we were in the midst of dedicating a Torah scroll at the synagogue. We found out that our kindergarten the night before has been attacked with swastikas painted all over the toys, etc. Our response to that was, in line to what we previously said, that we are not going to be affected. We worked the whole night, we cleaned up the whole place, and to show that the next morning we're not affected. Next morning, 8 o'clock, the kindergarten opened up on time, and at 9 o'clock I received a fax from Angela Merkel thanking me for not letting these people divert our Jewish life. So there is anti-Semitism. I know Leonard traveled extensively in Germany. However, as we said before, we have to use our energies to go forward.
I'm going to just jump in over here to add a point on that. I can honestly say that not a week, well, every other week at least, when I walk past a particular pub, making my way home from my shul with my kapota and black hat to my home, I will always get some kind of anti-Semitic comment thrown at me. Now, that might come as a surprise to the average North American who isn't used to that sort of thing, but you pretty much do get used to that sort of thing. And then you always have a choice of how you're going to respond. When I'm with my kids, for better or for worse, and against the advice of the CST, and probably against the advice that you would give here as well, I do always respond. When I'm with my kids, I feel got to take a stand. I have a big mouth. I'll always answer back. And then we'll see where it goes from there. But the bottom line is there are leaders who do advise that when you are in certain so-called no-go areas, maybe you are better off taking off your hat or indeed taking off your yarmulke or just keep a low profile. The bottom line is if you don't respect yourself, they won't respect you either. And it's only when you respect yourself that others will respect you.
Just want to welcome Rabbi Stambler, who's here from Warsaw, from Poland. There's no question about it, and I think as Chabad you will always find again and again that we will focus not on ignoring problems that exist, we'll acknowledge the problems that exist, we will always focus on how do you build and how do you move forward and how do you launch positive out of negative experiences. If I could just share something once happened. Before the year 2000, you may remember there was this huge evangelical push because there were certain organizations who felt that, 2000, a certain lost Jew was coming back and it was going to, sort of change the world. So they sent these missionary groups all over the whole world. They landed up in Johannesburg as well at one of the university campuses, and the busiest spot on the campus, and there were literally tens of hundreds of people walking up and down, and there they were, handing out flyers and trying to engage people in conversation. And that happened to be during Chol HaMoed Sukkos, in the middle of the holiday of Sukkos. The day before, I had been there on campus with my lulav and Kit, trying to get Jews to say the bracha and shake the lulav and esrog, and I probably had about a 20% hit rate. That day, these guys arrived, and they were trying to egg us on and engage us in conversation. I had one or two people helping me. So they stood on the main thoroughfare of the campus. We stood literally 6 feet away. Every single Jewish person who walked past, and they offered them a flyer and tried to engage them, we then said to them, show these guys that you're proud to be Jewish, come shake the lulav. We had 100% hit rate that day. So if we could just talk a moment about Poland. Rabbi Schochet, if you could pass the microphone, if you don't mind. So Rabbi Stambler has been in Poland since 2005, if I understand correctly, in Warsaw. Again, similar in a certain respect to Germany, because there's an association that we have with Poland and tremendous anti-Semitism. My own family came from Poland. And we tend to think, I think, still today that it's an incredibly anti-Semitic part of the world. In fact, one of the latest or most recent large countries to even get to have a Chabad presence. For many years, there was no Chabad presence, and there was not even encouragement from the Rebbe at certain stages to have Chabad in Poland. And yet, it sounds as though there is some Jewish resurgence in Poland today. And we'd just like to hear a little bit about the community, the growth of the community, and the challenges that you're facing.
Well, speaking about anti-Semitism in Poland, it's for sure a different kind of anti-Semitism. It's not active, it's not physical, and it's not something you meet every day in the street. Officially, there is a lot of tolerance in Poland. Polish government for many years have been supportive to Israel in the UN and in the EU, and they will be the first partners to participate in every official event. So officially, you don't find it. Not even on the street. More than that, when I made a big campaign of Ask the Rabbi, email of Ask the Rabbi, so there was a big interest in the media about it, that they didn't know that the rabbi can communicate by email, and I started to get many questions, mainly from Poles. So there is anti-Semitism, but it's not the active one and not the physical one. It's in the language, it's in the mentality. They are not even aware of their anti-Semitism. When you go to buy a nice picture, painting in the old town, in the old city of Warsaw, you would see a Jew with a beard counting money. So for them, it's a remedy, it's a zgulo to have to be rich. This is how they've been told, and they don't know it has to do with anti-Semitism. They have an expression that we love each other like brothers and we count money like Jews. but especially the young generation is being very tolerant, and Jewish people in Poland are living with a very difficult psychological problem, crisis of identity. Their parents didn't encourage them to tell openly about their identity. They remember the pre-war time, the Holocaust, communist regime, and a deportation that took place in 1968. But nevertheless, we see that there is new awareness and revival, and especially young generation are trying to be associated, and is growing. Until very recently, we did not find any anti-Semite problem. As you probably know, recently we're approaching a real serious problem that we would never expect to have, especially not from the Polish government, which is the ban on the Schochet. We find it as a big surprise that it was a very strong propaganda and campaign made by the animal rights foundations, who did it in a very silent and professional way. And one day we got the decision of the Supreme Court to explain differently the previous law of Poland, that actually there is a ban and it's not allowed to do Schochet. Poland recently, for the last 10 years, was a center of Schochet. Many people from all over the world. It was a big supplier to Israel and to Europe, even to the United States. And Polish government have tried to change it, and they lost, while there was the last decision of the Polish parliament not to allow kosher Schochet. And this is a problem of, first of all, that we don't have kosher meat, and second, it's changing our mood, our Jewish mood, and our Jewish identity is being challenged. And this is the problem we're facing right now, working very hard. We are hiring top level of lawyer and going to the tribunal court to change this decision. We do a very strong media campaign, but we do feel lonely on this issue. We feel that there is no awareness in the Jewish world of this problem, and there is no enough material that explains why Schochet is not less human than other methods of Schochet, and we need to strengthen all the weapon, all the answers why Schochet should be allowed, as for the medical side and as for the freedom of religion. So we do need support, and I think would be a good idea if we'll use the power of Chabad Shluchim, that every Polish ambassador all over the world will receive either a letter or a request for a meeting when it will be explained strongly how the Jewish community in every place in the world is being shocked, and would like to ask to remove this ban. We do get signals that when it will get to the court, it should be okay, but we need to make it that it will happen quick. And we need to keep supporting the Jewish community, something that will not make them fear to tell openly that they are Jews.
Well, please God, it should go well and should be matzliach. And if anybody has the opportunity to assist, how would they get in touch? Maybe the people have connections with their local Polish ambassador.
Well, to get in touch with me, it's very easy, as well as every Polish ambassador. I think that we will approach the Merkos L'Inyon Chinuch to make it mesuder, and to prepare the material for the shluchim what to do. But in the spirit of the Kinus, I do feel that we are an army, and that we should use this special power.
Thank you, Yasher Koyach. We're about to wrap up, and we're going to take one or two questions as well. So I'm just going to ask about Greisman in 1 minute, seeing as we've kept you quiet all this time. So just for 1 minute, where do you see the Chabad of Sweden and the Jewish population of Sweden headed?
Well, in connection to everything we spoke here before, I think that one of our greater challenges are to raise the awareness of Jews, that to be proud Jews, to be open about their Judaism, and to raise the level of Jewish knowledge, awareness, and practice. It's something that we do daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly around the clock to bring Jews back, to inspire them, to celebrate a little more, to be more involved, to learn more. It's important that Jews should be comfortable to be Jewish. One very typical Swedish characteristic is that people are very proud Jews, but the first thing they'll tell you when you meet them is, but I'm not religious, I'm just very Jewish. So that understanding that in order to be a proud Jew, you don't want to call it religion, call it whatever you want, but be an active Jew, do a little more. And this is also a very typical Swedish mentality. Religion is something you could almost say it's a dirty word. It's something that people don't want to hear of. I had a very interesting story. The first year I moved into the building I live in now, it's a big condominium complex. We have 150 apartments. And 2 weeks before Sukkot, I thought it was a long time, I approached the board of the building with permission to build a sukkah. Now, it's a big garden. There's lots of space. And I was sure, what's, the problem? Just give me 10 square meters. I don't need everything. They had a meeting, the board, and they came back with a negative response with a very typical Swedish answer. The property is public, and every person in the building that owns the building, everybody owns a share in the building, everybody has to have access 24/7 to every piece of the property. So I said, I'll keep the sukkah open. Everybody's welcome whenever they want. Everybody could come. Yeah, there'll be l'chaim for everybody. So, any case, that was already too late for that year. They said if you want for next year, we have the annual meeting of all the tenants in the building in April. You have to send in your request a month before, and then maybe will be a vote, we'll discuss it, and you will be able to get permission for next year. So what did I do? It's 2 weeks before Sukkot, so I need a sukkah. I rented a big truck, and I built a nice sukkah on the truck, and I parked the truck right outside the building on the street, so everybody could see that the sukkah will be there. So to make a long story short, in March, I wrote a letter explaining why a sukkah is so important for me. I never thought about a sukkah in March, but this I had to actually think about it. I wrote a letter, and in April we had the meeting, and I presented it as my religious need. I'm a Jew, and I need to eat in the sukkah, and I drink in the sukkah, and I will not be able to survive without it. You've seen how serious it was for me last year. I had to spend so much money renting a truck and parking it and building and everything. Anyways, it was a long discussion among all the tenants of the building, and one young man gets up, and he really voiced everybody's concern. He says, listen, you want to build something in the garden, you want to do this for 1 week, no problem. Just please do us a favor. Do not mention that it's a religious need. Just say you want to go camping with your children for a week in the garden. As long as you mix out the religion from the discussion, you will be able to get anything. But just don't say it's a religious issue. Thank God we won the vote by a big majority, and since then we have a very nice sukkah. The next year I invited all the neighbors for a free l'chaim, and it was a very nice celebration. And since then we have a very nice sukkah, and it's become a tradition. And all the neighbors are asking me every year before sukkahs, no, so when are you building the sukkah so we can come? So with a little effort and... So if there's a will, there's a way, and just be persistent and creative, you'll get through.
Stambler.
One more word about Poland and the Shechita. Because the world today is very small and very global, especially Europe, if we don't win this very important war on the Shechita in Poland, it can have a negative effect on the neighboring countries. So this is a real interest of the Jewish community all over the world. I also wanted to say that in addition to the local Jews in Poland, so there are 100,000 Jews coming to Poland every year, mainly go to the camps and to the sad places, but this is the time when they get inspired and open heart for Yiddishkeit, for real Yiddishkeit, either for tefillin or for more. And therefore we are initiating a lot of what to offer them, as for real Torah to learn while in Poland. And I would like to encourage the Shluchim to consider joining the March of the Living, and we will be offering a special program for the youth to really go out of there, not just with sadness and tears, but some real content.
Which is ultimately what we want to achieve across the board, is that we shouldn't become caught up in an attitude of negativity, of darkness, and of fear, but rather of positive and constructive. If I can ask Rabbi Schochet, if you might just wrap up. For everybody sitting here, it's one thing to listen to us, to listen to you and hear the different stories of what's happening in different parts of the world. What should the average person, wherever they may be, what should they be doing so that we can all band together to stem the rising tide of anti-Semitism?
I could only reiterate the same point I made earlier, and again, I would stress that I am aware that it has become a real problem, particularly on university campuses and even here in the United States. And the stories I've heard surprise me in particular here in the States. And those are the young Jews that are emerging to become potentially tomorrow's leaders. And we have to do everything that we can to fortify Jewish identity. And Jewish identity is fortified not just by the chicken soup on the Friday night, but by the necessary kind of Jewish education to make them appreciate and understand what it means to be a Jew, why it's important to always therefore hold your Jewish head held high, and that therefore when you maintain your identity and you walk proud wherever you may go as a Jew, well, others will then come to appreciate and respect you all the more for it.
I'd like to thank Rabbi Schisler and his wonderful panel of rabbis who are doing an outstanding job in places. Rabbi Stambler in Poland, Rabbi Schochet in the UK, Rabbi Tiechtel, who I just visited in Berlin, magnificent achievement in Rabbi Greisman in Stockholm, and I'm sure if any of you want to come to their houses for Shabbos, they'll welcome you. Just take your wife. You have a vacation in any one of these countries. And also, we just recently, one of the Chabad rabbis in Poland was named the chief rabbi of Krakow, which returned to one of the great cities of Jewish tradition that we have today, a Chabad rabbi as chief rabbi. So the influence of Chabad is growing very much in Europe, and hopefully they'll be able to mitigate these problems with a sense of pride.